Clean it like riding, but I know that they ain't. Ride or die. I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.
Can't the Christians have nice things like incoherent concepts?
Apparently, they cannot articulate, but it's an understanding that is divinely provided in a sense.
Can't the Christians have nice things like incoherent concepts?
Apparently incoherent.
Yeah, you can.
Well, it might be.
I think the way Matt Slick kind of talks about it is he kind of acknowledges like, paradoxical. He will not acknowledge contradiction. You can't take that approach.
We'll see in a couple weeks when I debate Matt Slick on it. We'll see what he has to
Oh
say.
yeah, that's right. It's coming up. That'd be. I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, less than 2 weeks.
Just embrace dialetheism. I don't understand it.
I'd like to hear his definitions for a paradox and a contradiction.
I don't think they'd be the same at all.
Yeah, usually what they say about paradox is that paradox is a apparent contradiction, and obviously contradiction is an actual one. So that's one way that, for example, James Anderson in the literature tries to distinguish between the two. Now, you just might say, well, that's not how I use the word paradox, which is fine. But he just means that it looks like a contradiction, but it's not an actual one. But what James Anderson says is that um, it looks like a contradiction, and he even argues to show that all of the proposed solutions thus far, he sort of does like a taxonomy of them and explains why none of them work. Um, but then in the second half of the book, he provides his own epistemology for trying to justify why Christian can hold to these doctrines like the Trinity and Incarnation, even though they can't show you how it's not a contradiction. So it looks like one, but it's not an actual one, even if I can't show you how, and I'm still justified in believing in it.
That's
Basically
actually very similar to my position.
Or another way would be that it may be well founded and all the evidence points that it's true, but it can still be paradoxical. I think that'd be the first definition if you look it up, or at least close to it. Last time I pulled it up the other day.
I mean, of course, that's what he's saying, James. He's saying that he's justified in believing it because of other evidence, whether it be the Bible or spiritual experience or historical facts, or putting all of them together, right? So, of course, he's considering that.
Jake, is he
But
saying he's a Mysterian about it?
oh yeah, I don't know if he uses that term in the book, but Dale Tuggy actually had applied that to him, and he sort of just wears the label now like a badge of honor. So yeah, he's definitely a Mysterian.
Yep.
But there are a number of different problems with his view, though. I mean, so
The next thing I want to read up on, and I've heard you talk about it, I heard Bob talk about it, is the energy and essence distinction, because I'm not too familiar with how they're laying that out. But when I started looking into it, there's a lot of stuff to read on that. So
yeah,
that is added to my already incredibly huge long reading list.
yeah, it's just basically a distinction between God's essence and His attributes, and saying that there's a real distinction between them. So the energies. Like, for example, the Orthodox will say that God's knowledge is an energy, God's power is an energy, right? And so, but then also refer to like actions. So it's just you can think of it, roughly speaking, for somebody who's not familiar with it, as God's
Hey,
attributes.
what's a good English article that I can read? Because you and I had that conversation where in Islam, you guys don't have a definition for literal and figuratively separately, but it's like they're both included and the same. What would be a good article that would kind of flesh that out more for me?
Um, well, I wouldn't say that it's in Islam. I would say that in a particular strand of Islamic theology, and a specific thinker that I'm attracted to, um, holds that position. So there's in Islamic terminology, there's a distinction between what's called the haqiqah and the majaz, which is um, you can translate it as literal and metaphorical understanding. And Ibn Taymiyyah basically says that this distinction is superficial. There is no real distinction between literal and metaphorical understanding. And he gives arguments for that and says everything is literal. Everything's haqiqah. Um, but yeah, that's how it goes into theory of language and very
Because it
in-depth
seems,
stuff, dude.
at least to
But
me, like it seems like there would be a distinction. Like if I say I have a cat in my house, I have a literal cat. But if I had like a stuffed cat, I could say I have a cat in my house. But then that might be a figurative speech, or I have. So it seems like, at least from the English language, that they're clearly separated. But what would be the distinguishment? How
No,
would
he would
somebody
deny that.
understand? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. How would somebody understand something that's meant to be taken physical from non-physical, given that approach?
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with physical and non-physical. It has to do with um, literal and metaphor. So it's not really the same thing. Um, I mean, if you want a contemporary similarity, if you want to read like somebody contemporary in English, I would say that his theory of language and what I would hold to is not exactly the same, but most closely resembles someone like Wittgenstein and his understanding of attacking
Who
Aristotelian
was that one
notions. And
more time?
well, I can send it to you,
Oh
Wittgenstein.
yeah, that'd be perfect.
but
Because
Yeah,
yeah,
in
you
fact,
mentioned
there's an article. There's an article if you want. That's a relatively short article that tries to go through some of these points and compares Ibn Taymiyyah's theory of language to Wittgenstein and shows how they're very similar and gives some of the arguments for it. But yeah, he
yeah,
would say things like a single word that is just written on a board or something like that. It doesn't really convey any meaning apart from context, apart from um, a speaker that you have some familiarity with and the way they're trying to convey something.
yeah. If you could send me
There's a lot of arguments for
like
it.
the more detailed in the article, because you spent like an hour and a half like explaining that to me, and the only thing I took away is it seems like some kind of equivocation between two meanings.
Yeah, I was
No,
kind of wondering about that myself, Jay, because I've been in a lot of these Muslim rooms, and specifically, as an example, would be like the two hands of Allah. Like, is it
yeah,
understand metaphorically, or the other one was something about Allah descending from His throne, like in a sense, and so
right.
is that understood like figuratively or literally? And it seems to be some sort of weird combination of both when I hear the
No,
explanations.
no,
No.
it's not. But this is what I'm trying to explain to you. There's no possible way that I will be able to explain all of the details behind this position without you actually reading something. I mean that's just reality because I can explain it to you, but you're not really going to understand very much of what I'm saying unless you're familiar with language debates and things like ordinary language philosophy. And uh, I mean, it's just going to be very difficult. But no, Ibn Taymiyyah's position specifically is he just collapses them and says there is no real distinction between them. There's no real distinction between literal and metaphoric speech. Everything is literal, right? So, and he was doing that going against the dominant strand of other schools of thought in Islam who held to some type of like Aristotelian essentialism when it comes to language. So he's a contextualist when it comes to language rather than a conventionalist. But again, there's just so many things to unpack with the
So
conversation.
this is probably a a pivoting question for sure. But so I've heard like some Shias or Ismaili that it's asserted that they have an Islamic Trinity. And I've heard it explained before, but would you call that an Islamic Trinity, or would you say that it's just attributing multiple gods? I mean, what would be like the shorthand answer for that?
Well, they don't. I mean, they don't believe it's a trinity, right? Um, I've pointed out the similarities between their Neoplatonic doctrine and the Trinity, which there's obviously similarities, and Ismailis will even recognize that. But no, I mean just Trinity in sort of a colloquial usage, or if you want to frame it that way. But it's not exactly the same. But there are similarities, and yeah, of course, our problems with the position are numerous. We don't believe in three eternal beings. We don't believe that someone besides God can have his attributes rather than him. For example, we don't believe that someone besides God can be eternal and omniscient, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and it's just straightforwardly against the text. So a simple reading of the text. So
Now,
um,
typically, like, isn't the response to you that they say, "Well, you guys have an eternal Quran"? At
what's
least
that?
it seems like that's the first response that they'll say, "Well, you're criticizing us, but you have an eternal Quran." Because from their
No,
perspective, they would say it's created, correct?
no, we don't. That's not really their response.
No,
And we don't believe in an eternal floating Quran besides God. So
what would be their response then? Just so I understand that.
their
Isn't it something like
response,
eternal speech or something?
their response is that they have a different exegesis of those passages, which most people are not going to be convinced with because they're absolutely ridiculous. Meaning that, and they're actually a group which Sunni Muslims call them the Batiniya. So batin basically refers to something that is hidden or like an inner meaning. So what they typically will say is you have like the outer meaning of the text, and then you have like a hidden or inner meaning of the text, and that is known through the Aga Khan or the Imams of the past, or people in the Dawah to a certain extent, that sort of reveal what that hidden meaning or understanding is, right? So you have the apparent meaning of the text, and their exegesis is going to include a hidden or like sort of spiritual meaning of the text that is not really apparent on the face of it. And we're just going to reject that. We're going to say that you're just playing games.
Nope. Thank you for your thoughts. Hey, John, what would be another fun room title? Is the logical problem of atheism, and see if any of them come into the room.
The logical problem. No, okay, so what would be the logical problem, James?
So, if you are claiming that you're agnostic in the philosophical sense, and you're not taking a position that the proposition is true or false, but yet you put forth an argument that God does not exist, in that particular case, you are in a logical contradiction to the position you're trying to maintain. You're no longer arguing from that point of agnosticism.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've done that perhaps a lot of times, James, and I always frame it anecdotally in the sense of like someone who, for example, claims to lack a belief in God, and they also lack the belief that there's no God, and yet they're going to use words like, sky daddy, myth, fairy tale, delusion. All of these terms represent some sort of belief in the falsity of the proposition, and so there is in my view, a contradiction there. But I mean, I've had those types of discussions, but mostly like because not all atheists qualify under that. So it would just only apply to certain people, uh, and not, and a particular atheist might not apply to them. So it's very difficult to say atheism because of these certain individuals. You know what I mean? The best you could do
Yep.
is say many atheists or something like that. Now, that is often the question that's posed by so many people in the last several um, months here is, what is the logical problem of atheism? That is often what is the contradiction of atheism? And it almost seems a little malformed, because atheism is just simply what, a belief there's no God, a lack of belief in God, that kind of a thing. And so that's just kind of like asking, what's the contradiction of a tree, right? But I do think that the view itself can be self-defeating. I think it could be. I think you can provide an argument for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can provide an argument for it, but they're going to reject. Um, they're going to reject certain premises or uh, arguments for certain premises. They're going to reject.
Now, that particular argument, Jake, would it be just categorical, or would it be more like based upon an individual?
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, it would be meant to be categorical, but it's only going to work on certain assumptions about things like truth and the nature of truth. And if you disagree with my theory, then you're going to have a debate about that and things like that. But
Now,
yeah, I
there's
mean,
a guy.
I can give an argument that even the proposition atheism is true entails a contradiction.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.